Welcome back to another episode of David and Mark's Wild Adventures. It's great to see you, David. We're
Good to see
here.
you, Mark. Hey, where are the glasses, Mark?
Oh, they're right here. These are like
Oh,
so
okay.
so. I can see fine for. Thanks for asking. I can see fine for distance. I got these cheap little readers that for the rest of
Okay.
my life.
Very good.
Um,
That's fine.
and let me comment on your eyewear. It's not reflecting blue light as much as it had been in the past.
Yeah, well, based on feedback from some anonymous sources, I've learned that my computer glasses, which have a blue lens, do tend to reflect the light, which
Yeah.
is probably what you want when you're looking at your computer. However, if you're doing video like this, obviously it creates that reflection. So I'm back to my progressive glasses. If they start to brown out a little bit, it's because I have those transition lenses,
Mm.
and I can't do much
I
about
think
that.
I think the tens of thousands of viewers that we have all thank you for this.
You're very welcome. Now they can see my eyes.
That's right. Okay, we're here to talk about March 2023 eGrocery online sales numbers, which the report and the press release have just come out, and I'd like to get let me kick this off by asking this off the top question. Can so in the report, and you can get into the numbers. You pull on this continuing thread about cost and convenience. It looks like cost is really weighing on the March results. Can you go into explain some of the factors that are causing you to see that happen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we look at the results, we try to interpret those based on the results and the inputs that we receive from those households that participated. But beyond that, we try to, add additional context or color
Yeah.
to help interpret those. I think one that's worth mentioning is, we're having a kind of a tapering off of some of the pandemic era support controls. And as surprising that it is, that's still occurring. And the one that most noticeably occurred most recently was the expiration of the emergency pandemic related SNAP additional payments that households that participated in that received. And that's the equivalent of $95 additional spending on groceries per month.
Now is that,
Uh,
that now is that that's across the U.S., right? Because that was a federal program.
Yeah, and some states, I think there were 17 states that actually that expired in January, so they no longer had that additional $95 starting in February. Now that's only about 25% of the SNAP participating households if you look at it based on where those households live. So the remaining three quarters, actually it's a little more than three quarters of the SNAP related households, they lost that additional $95 at the end of February. So, depending on, how you look at that, I mean, that's going to have an impact on, a sizable subsegment of the
Yeah, it
population. I
would.
mean, it's north of 10% of the households that participate in SNAP. Now, to the extent that they were online, we don't know that, but that is a material factor that could be contributing to the headwinds that we're seeing.
And
Obviously, go
and
ahead.
then you had mentioned there was another program that would have at least some impact on the disposable income. It was what, Medicare,
Well, Medicaid. Now that
Medicaid.
that
Sorry.
starts to you know taper back this month,
Yeah.
the month of April. So we'll start to see that hit a different subset, probably more older households. They could be lower income as well. And then also to just kind of pile on, it's worth remembering that college debt payments have been
Mm.
suspended, and they haven't started back up yet. So people aren't being punished for not making payments towards that fund. Now, that could start anywhere from 2 months from today or the end of August, depending on whether there's some legislative moves
Yeah.
that codifies it, or it kind of just sunsets. If it sunsets, then we'll have it reemerge probably in August. And then the other, just to keep in mind, is let's look at households who own homes that have a variable adjustable rate mortgage. That's a sizable subsegment, and when those adjust, that has a serious and severe impact on their financials. So there's a lot of factors that are still coming down the pike, so to speak, that are going to create issues that are going to put more pressure on the purchasing power of households, and how they respond to that could directly or indirectly reflect grocery shopping behavior.
So in terms of that behavior, what we're also seeing and I'm thankful that you put this into the report, that there's a clear preference for receiving method based on household income. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So as we were trying to understand or better interpret the numbers, we did look at the prevalence rate, that is the percentage of monthly active users that used delivery or pickup by income level. And what we found was that the lowest income level that we measure, which is households earning less than 50,000, were about 30% more likely to use pickup as opposed to delivery. Now, if we went to the other end of the income spectrum and analyzed those households making over 200,000, they're twice as likely to use delivery as opposed to pickup. Now, one of the hypotheses for that is, well, pickup costs less to use. And to be clear, when we say that from a consumer or customer standpoint, the cost to use the service is a function of the fee we pay, any additional charges that are associated with it, as well as the tip that would be paid out to the driver if we were comparing pickup to delivery. So when you add those up, that's significant. And then also keeping in mind that if you were a household participating in SNAP, SNAP only pays for the price of the products, not for the cost of the service or the added non-price related charges. So, that's why we were looking at it. And in doing so, it could help explain why pickup had a slight decline in household usage or reach this month as opposed to delivery. And that is in part reflected in the mix of customers that use it based on income level.
Clear. There was one other data point that I wanted to pull out, and that was order frequency. Your statement that it has dropped to the lowest level since the onset of COVID. Can you put that within context for us?
Right. So, not to say we've been spoiled over the last 2 to 3 years with the pandemic, but it has reestablished expectations in terms of, how often or how frequently a household may be shopping online. As you mentioned, we are now, as of March, recording the lowest level of order frequency, 2.42, I think it was, for the month of March, anytime in the pandemic for the most part. We are still above pre-pandemic order frequency. It's just that the market is continuing to reset or retrench. What is clear is that, the bottom hasn't yet been firmly established. And what that would signal to us is that as circumstances continue to change, and one is you look at, for instance, COVID, and frankly, I can't remember the last time I saw or heard a news article about COVID, right? Yeah. I mean, I have to look for it. But our cases are measurably down on a year-over-year basis. They're probably 25% down versus 2022, 60% down or so versus 2021. And, that has caused people to return to, what had been their preferred method of shopping. Obviously, persistent price inflation is also becoming a factor when people say, gee, I just don't have as much money to buy groceries because groceries cost more. Now I'm trying to find ways to save money. And if you're shopping online, one way may be looking at the method and saying, you know what, I'd like to shop online, but I can't justify paying the additional charges for delivery. So I'm going to go to pickup.
Right.
So, there's those considerations that we need to remember. But again, we expected a decline. We haven't called the bottom. We haven't projected the bottom. What we did in our 5-year forecast, if you recall, Mark, is we
Yep.
did forecast that 2023 would actually be a down year,
A down year.
that
Yep.
we would expect a decline in sales due to a variety of circumstances and the tapering of price supports, the receding range of new cases, and the concern about any type of respiratory illnesses were all known headwinds coming into this year. So we expected a downturn. That's not surprising to us. I think, more importantly, it's just, now reestablishing what we view as the go forward view, and what that means in terms of what we should be prioritizing or working on.
And would you consider this now a good time for grocers to really put the foundations in place, if they haven't already, for 2024, 2025, and the subsequent years? Because we know, based on the forecast, we know that online sales numbers will rebound and increase beyond where they will be this year.
Yeah, I think the answer to your question, in short answer, is yes. We need to keep in mind right now that we have an engaged base of consumers that we need to maintain or retain, and keep them engaged. There's going to be a segment of that group that will still be the fence sitters, where we will anticipate some defections due to, again, the changing circumstances. And that is, their preference is in-store shopping, and they're still online for a variety of reasons. But, I think when you look at it going forward, right now, is the time to really strengthen that user experience, because you can lose and gain customers based on levels of dissatisfaction going forward. I mean, if you don't do a good job delivering against the promise, you're giving your customer a reason to consider shopping somewhere else. Conversely, if you're doing a good job, you may be putting yourself in a good position or a better position to pick up some of the low-hanging fruit for those customers who still are attracted to shopping online. They just haven't found that acceptable alternative, or they are still craving something that they're not getting from their current provider. So, it is where we need to think about, how can we keep our engaged base retained, and how can we continue to create some points of differentiation in our products or services to attract those customers who are open to trying something new at this point.
Right. So, David, let me ask you: do you have a question for me?
Well, what are you hearing from the retailers now? Is again, as you said, is this the time to reestablish the business plan, or to kind of kick those assumptions? What are you hearing?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with clients and with prospective clients, and they've seen all of the great research that Brick Meets Click has been publishing, and they understand that the results have definitely a national perspective. They want to, so the questions we're getting is, that may be great at a national level, but is that really applicable in my market? Like in the Southwest or in California, is it really a pickup market versus a delivery market, which is the perception that a lot of the industry has had? And so, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our views on the market fit for pickup and delivery is still fairly intact. The additional analysis we did more recently on the income stratification and the prevalence of usage between those two methods would, I think, just tweak it slightly. But I think that would reinforce to retailers that, hey, you may be in a trade area that we would categorically say would be pickup dominant or delivery dominant based on certain geodemographic characteristics, whether it's household density, car ownership, income level. But now I think, this additional analysis would say, well, now you really do need to look at an overlay income as a way to, further tighten that up at a more micro level, because within those trade areas, you obviously have neighborhoods or pockets of communities where you can have significant differences in income that could sway those results. Ultimately, bottom line, I would say to the retailers first and foremost is, be sure that you offer both pickup and delivery. And if you don't,
Yeah.
you should be trying to get both of those online as soon as possible, because what is crystal clear is that there remains very strong personal preferences for one method or the other. That's true at the market level, and it's extremely acute within the retailer banner. And retailers could look at that if they have the transactional data and the household identifier that would be able to show that for them, assuming they
Well,
have both pickup and delivery.
yeah, and that's you make a great point. It's do retailers actually have the data to then generate those the segmentation from which you then can glean some insights as to customer behavior. And I think that's a challenge that we're seeing consistently across a number of retail players in the market, is being
Yeah,
able to interpret those results.
and I think, there, to me, one of the things that I observed through some of the recent field work that we've been engaged with is that there,
It's not coming out yet. It's coming out soon.
yeah, is that retailers have a real intense focus on delivering digital deals to
Mm,
retailers online, with digital coupons or trying to replicate what's in store. And while that's understandable, I think the way we reframe things is, are you rewarding the behavior that you're seeking? In this case,
that's a great point.
the digital deals, not a bad thing to offer, especially, for instance, if you have a buy one get one free in store and your parity pricing. The inclination is we want to offer it online without question. If you have ads, deals in the weekly circular, you want to honor those online. You want to protect those to make sure those same offers are there. But what I mean about rewarding behavior is that, more retailers need to, and I say more because not many are, need to take a different look at, are we rewarding the behaviors that benefit both parties? And,
Yep.
we can look at the stratification of pickup fees or delivery fees. And we've had that conversation before. And I say reward because if someone's trying to stretch the buck and the trade-off is between, cost to convenience, or said another way, getting it quicker or paying less, then you want to give the customer the choice so that they can make that trade-off, but then reward them if they make the trade-off that benefits you. So if they
Okay.
say, you know what, I want to save money, so I'll take the order later. The reason why you want to reward that behavior is it enables you, the retailer, to potentially save money or create internal efficiencies in picking and packing that order. And I think we need to see more of that, with the recognition that our core problem that we all have is, how do we improve the profitability of this high cost to
Yeah.
serve channel? And we need to be honest and transparent with that. Some retailers do a better job than others, but we need to remind our customers that shopping online is a value added service that costs more to provide. And we need to find ways of, cost sharing and also gain sharing, right? And so it goes beyond the stratifying of
What do you mean?
fees.
What do you mean by gain sharing?
Well, the gain sharing is, hey, Mark, if you agree that you're going to place your order to be received 6 hours from now, and that enables us to batch your order with my order, we know we're going to save 30% labor per order. And
Got
so
it.
that's a win for us. And the gain share is you're going to win by paying a lower fee associated with getting your order in 6 hours versus requiring us to go out and pick it as a single order and deliver it to you in, let's say,
that
2 hours.
That makes sense.
And it's all about trade-offs, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, because the work that I'm referencing isn't out yet, is there are a litany of examples within and outside the grocery industry about where companies are encouraging their customers to make the choice between, convenience and cost, right? And I'll just share one example. Take Netflix.
Yep.
Netflix, up until recently, has been an ad-free program, right? And in their search for growth, they've continued to slowly walk up their rates. Well, now their customers have expressed some level of concern with increasing cost. So I think Netflix very smartly said, we'll give you the choice. You can have an ad-free experience at this price, or you can get a discounted fee if you have an ad-supported program. So they're not forcing or mandating customers one way or the other, but rather empowering them and giving them the control to make the trade-off choice themselves.
Yeah.
So that they can say which one truly is more important, right? And actions speak louder than words.
And I'm curious, have you seen any numbers as to the uptick on the ad-supported model? I have, to be honest, I haven't.
I haven't seen anything yet, and I think what grocers can learn is there is nothing different than the normal news cycle. There is a normal kind of life to any change when it comes to pricing, and it should be expected that the initial reaction generally is lukewarm at best, as consumers realize that the free lunch is over.
Yeah.
And in these times, it's the better of the two options that you can pursue. I think we're getting very close to that crossroads for most regional grocers, because regional grocers have been following a pricing strategy online that isn't necessarily enabling them to improve the level of profitability as much as they would like. And more importantly, the alternative ways that they have to improve profitability may not be as large or as significant for them as opposed to some of the large market leaders that they're following. Yeah. So we really do need to revisit and retest and reevaluate our pricing with a focus on how do we reward the behaviors that benefit both us and our customers.
So David's been teasing some new research that's recently been conducted and will be coming out soon. So not to give too much away, but I love the notion of rewarding the behavior you're seeking. So that's a great concept, and undoubtedly we'll be double clicking more on that as in the months ahead. David, I really appreciate your time today. Look forward to our next connect. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, they could reach out to you, Mark, and then you could simply pass a note along. That's probably the easiest way for me, right? Or they could reach.
I am your digital assistant.
There you go. Of course, connect with me on LinkedIn, or you could always send me an email at david.bishop@brickmeetsclick.com.
Awesome. Folks, you can get hold of me at mercatus.com. Email mark.fairhurst at just like my name at mercatus.com.